Right, Council, we are running a few minutes late, but we will get started. I'm going to call the meeting to order and remind everyone to please disclose of any pecuniary interest at the appropriate time. And we're going to go right to number 4 on our agenda, which is the minutes of the previous council meeting. How does council want to deal with those minutes? Councillor Mitchell is moving to file, and Councillor Morris is seconding that. Any questions, errors, or omissions on those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving and filing. That is carried. Thank you. There is no business arising from the previous meetings, so we'll go to scheduled meetings and events. Is there any questions about any of those meetings? Okay, we will move on to councillors' commitments. Does anyone have any commitments that they would like to add to our list here?
I wish I could.
I know, I think everybody does. So we will go around the table. Councillor Westgate, do you have anything for it?
No, I don't have anything tonight.
All right. Councillor Mitchell.
Nothing this evening.
Okay, and Councillor Morris.
Absolutely nothing. The guys are doing a great job.
Well, that's always good to hear. The only thing I had is I wanted to thank the Watford Rotary Club for their community takeout style fish fry. They did a fantastic job. I'm told that they served over 400 meals in a safe way for everyone in our community. So thank you so much to the Watford Rotary Club. I know one of our councillors is on that club. So thank you. If you could pass on our gratitude to the rest of your Rotarians, we would appreciate that.
I will do that.
Thank you. So we'll go on to staff items. First one is a verbal update, is some verbal updates from Amanda. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Mayor Rambout. So I just wanted to I have a few updates that I just listed all together here. One was to let you know that following the recent council decision allowing or approving moving forward with electronic public meetings for drain and say planning applications outside of the Committee of Adjustment, we have started to look at the list of drain processes and meetings that are required that have been on delay due to COVID, and there is quite a list, quite a list to try to fit in one meeting. So we were thinking, we're still working on our inventory, but we are thinking of proposing a special council meeting on October 28th. We were thinking following the already scheduled Public Works Committee meeting and doing just drain meetings and processes. So we think after a preliminary review, we'll have over, I'd say between 7 and 10 different processes. So we're wanted to complete the inventory, and then should we want to formally recommend that we schedule that meeting, we'll bring it back on October 5th at our regular council meeting for council's approval or consideration. I just wanted to give a heads up at this time that that's kind of where we were thinking.
That sounds like a lot of fun, Amanda.
Yeah.
A lot of trains. We thought it would be too much to try to include into one regular meeting, and then a lot of planning to try to schedule them so that we only had 2 drains per meeting and then leading to continued kind of delays. That's where we were thinking.
Councillor Morris, did you have a comment?
Amanda, is like every farmer that's on the drain going to try to get into Zoom with us?
So we've worked with Andrew using some sample procedures from other municipalities that have started their processes, their drain meetings electronically. So the way we intend to do it is send our usual notice along with pre-registration. So you would have to pre-register to participate in the drain meeting. Of course, you can view it on YouTube. Anyone can view it anytime, either live or following the matter, and anyone can submit any comments or questions outside of that avenue by email as well. So we won't be sending out in the notice the actual credentials, but ask people to register. And Zoom can accommodate the numbers we anticipate. We don't anticipate a problem. So that's one. Two is I just wanted to follow up. As you know, our fire agreement with Lambton Shores is due to expire at the end of the year. So we had sent a letter to the municipality requesting a review of the agreement, and in particular, we'd requested an automatic aid format to the agreement. What we did do, Brad and I, or Chief Goodhill and I, met with Lambton Shores and their fire chief just last week, and had a great conversation. And Lambton Shores notified us that they're actually in the kind of mid to late stages of completing their own fire services review. And so they asked about our timelines, and I hope I accurately expressed by saying that we just want to make sure we have something that we can agree to in place prior to the end of the year. It doesn't need to be today, but it needs to be soon. And they agreed with that, but they asked if they could have a little more time to complete their internal review, and we'll meet again in a month or so after they look at their own services. So we'll keep council updated as those conversations unfold. But it was a good meeting. And thirdly, and finally, it occurred to me after our special council meeting on September 14th that right now we started our rural farm dwelling severance review process prior to starting our official plan review process. However, our rural severance review has been delayed due to COVID also. So we're at the final stage in that process where we need another public meeting, and then council could approve or not approve or make a change. And then there would be an appeal period prior to coming into effect. But some of the preliminary feedback that we've been receiving through the official plan process indicates a high level of interest in the rural severance policy. So our planner and I have undertaken a review of kind of the two processes as they unfold and the potential timelines. And after a review, it is our thought, but I wanted council's feedback, that we roll the rural severance process into the official plan review process. What that would mean is that you'd see a little bit of a delay in the implementation of any decision regarding the rural severance policy, but probably only a delay of 3 months. So if you're looking at your public meeting and your appeal period, if you made a decision on the rural severance process, you could have it implemented sooner. But not that much sooner. Not much. Here. And the challenge, I think, based on some of the public feedback we've been getting, is that I don't know that people separate the two. So if we approve our rural farm severance policy now or not, whichever the case may be, then I think we'll still get this engagement in the official plan process specific to the rural farm severance process, but then it may have already been decided. So we were thinking, given the timelines, that maybe we could roll them all together, and that way we'd have the professional consultants, the guidance on how that policy unfolds as well. But if that's too much information, as I'm trying to explain it, I'm like, maybe I should have wrote a report on that. So I'm happy to bring it back if there's not a consensus or thoughts on it now.
Councillor Morris.
Amanda, you said a holdup of 3 months, but is this making the two public meetings we already had have to be repeated?
No, so it wouldn't mean they'd have to be repeated. And the feedback that we got from those public meetings has been shared with our consultants already. So all that information, although they weren't physically there, they got all the notes, all the comment forms from those meetings as well. What I mean by the 3 month delay is that if we approve the rural farm severance policy tomorrow, then there's still an appeal period process. And so step one would be we have to have another public meeting just in compliance with the Planning Act. Those require a 20-day notice period. Then we'd have to schedule the public meeting. Then we'd have another appeal period following that. And by the time you look at realistically scheduling that as it comes to a council meeting and 20 days, the earliest meeting we could do that is October 28th. So the rural farm severance period and everything could be done, say, by the end of the year, hypothetically. But the official plan process is targeted to be completed by the end of February. So that's what I mean. Like, we could roll them together, but the difference is only 2 to 3 months.
But won't the official plan need 20 days for appeal after it too?
Yes, it will. It will still have an appeal period, but everything would be together, all rolled up in a nice bow with very clear policies defining everything that the official plan would cover, as opposed to a separate thing.
I'd still like to see it move forward, but I understand your point.
Councillor Westgate?
I think it's a good to delay it, and we'll do it with the whole official plan. As long as the minor variance committee doesn't get a lot of these that they know, we're gonna have to turn them down because it doesn't meet our official plan right now. As long as the people are well aware of that, if they wait, it'll probably be okay, but I hate passing something that's against our official plan.
Amanda?
That's a great point, Councillor Westgate. And as a stopgap measure, our planner and I were thinking we could actually do a quick training session for Committee of Adjustment, just to review what our policies are around farm severances and severances right now, update them on the official plan process and what will be included in it, and kind of just review roles and responsibilities. We haven't done it since the committee came on, so we thought it might be timely to target, the next few months to do that as well. If that could help your question.
I know
Yes,
there
that
was,
would help. We do have a meeting on Wednesday night, but that'll be too early.
It's too soon. Yeah.
I did receive some feedback about the last meeting from some people that I was discussing the official plan with. I was surprised that didn't come to the meeting, and I think there was some misunderstanding. They thought it was just about the rural severances and not about the entire official plan. So I think it might be advantageous to have them brought together and make it very clear that it's the whole plan that we're looking at, as opposed to just the rural severances. When you have the two issues separated the way we have, it kind of confuses people in the public, I think. And I think this group that we have helping us with the official plan would do a good job in making sure that we have all of our I's dotted, T's crossed when it comes to this change as well. So I personally think it's a good idea to bring the whole process together. And it's not like it's a year's difference that we're talking about.
Right.
And I would suggest that if staff could let people know if they are going for that type of thing, that we are redoing our official plan, your chances are much better if you wait until after that date to go or to bring this forward, right?
Yes, of course, we can do that.
Do you need a motion to go with that, or do you? Or staff
Sure,
direction?
a motion or direction would be fine.
Is anyone wanting to make Colin, or sorry, Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, I'll make that motion, Madam
Okay.
Mayor.
And Councillor Westgate, were you going to second that?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor of melding the two processes together? That is carried. Or opposed? That is carried. All right,
Thank you.
Council. We do have a delegation at 6:30, but we have about 10 minutes before then. So I'm going to go to number 10 on our agenda, which is accounts. And we have the GL report there. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the GL report? Trevor, did you want to make any?
Not at this time. I just think we have to watch where we lie revenue wise now. So we're starting to track that more.
Okay. So we do need a motion to receive and file that. Moved by Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Mitchell, all in favor. That is carried. And we'll go on to the non-action correspondence. Did anyone want to highlight anything in the non-action tonight? Councillor Morris.
Question more than anything, under 903, which is our building permits. We have a corporation, Dove Developments, want to erect a drive-through sign. I'm a little confused.
Who wants to speak to that?
So that is a signage permit at 5271 Nauvoo Road, which I believe is the address of the Tim Hortons location. Councilor
Oh,
Morris.
okay. Okay, I just drive-through sign kind of got me a little bit, just where is this going? Okay, that, and the other one was 907. I'd like to support.
907 is the Town of Gore Bay resolution to support long-term care facility inspections. So you're moving that we support that motion. Do we have a
Yes, I am.
second to that? Seconded by Councillor Mitchell. Any questions or comments about that resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. And was there any other ones that caught anybody's eye? Then we do need a motion to receive and file the remainder of the non-action. Moved by Councillor Westgate, seconded by Councillor Mitchell, all in favor. That is carried. And we will go to action correspondence. I'm just going to quickly go through that. The first one is the Township of Plush Lynch, which was the resolution regarding COVID funding support.
Haven't we already done that? That just seems awful familiar.
I'm not sure.
Do you know what? I don't know offhand. We'll have to get back to you unless Heather has a better memory than myself.
I have no problem with it. I thought it was a repeat.
Okay, the second one is Debbie France, residents of Norfolk County, stop illicit cannabis grow ops. The next one is Township of North Glengarry resolution regarding long-term care homes, which I believe we just supported. Is that the same resolution?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. And the next one is Watford Legion Branch 172 request for annual bucket drive. Councillor Westgate, you'd like to move that we support that, and seconded by Councillor Morris. Any questions or comments about that? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. That's something they've been doing for several years, and I think it's a fun way for them to raise some money. We will go on to 13A, which is staff reports on the current municipal service level and COVID-19 impacts.
Mayor Ramba,
Yes.
just going back, and I'm sorry, I apologize if I missed this, did we do or receive the balance of correspondence for action correspondence as well?
Thank you. I apologize for that. We do need a motion for that. Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Morris, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you for that reminder. Sorry about that, Amanda. So Amanda has once again done a great report on the current municipal service levels. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that report? Councillor Morris.
Just, I guess for Teresa, this new announcement of Fords, how does that affect our arena and rentals and stuff?
So my interpretation, which I have not yet verified, is that it only affects us if we're not staffed. So for example, the arena is always staffed. So the gathering limits remain the same. We don't have to decrease. And where I think there's some question is for things in the hall. So I'd already booked a couple things and they fell within the previous limits. So I've agreed that we would have staff there. It might be myself, more than likely. But yeah, so, and then we'll just have to enforce it or share the word for things like yoga, that they'll have to keep their limit to 10 now. Am I correct, Amanda, on the 10? Yeah, because I don't see us staffing those, but I do see I just met with a family and we do have a wedding dinner coming up that already fell within the limits. And so they were in a bit of a panic on Sunday when I met with them, but I did agree to have staff there because it's 3 weeks away. So I don't know if I clearly answered your question.
No, that's good.
but
I
we're
was
trying-
thinking about the figure skaters and the hockey players, or like
Yeah, no,
the actual ice.
yeah, it doesn't affect that when you read it, and we're already staffed the entire time that the arena is open.
Okay.
So anything happening there is fine. Where we run into maybe some questionable things is things that are going to happen at Centennial Hall or Warwick Hall.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I believe Doug Ford's motive was to try to decrease the number of parties and spontaneous get-togethers that have been happening. And I think it's mostly directed for the younger generations as well, but they can't do that. Like just say, oh, anybody under this age having a party is going to get charged. And then, so they're doing the best they can to try to keep COVID under control, but I don't believe it's going to impact our arena at this point.
Good.
So we're just going to keep praying that the COVID numbers stay under control so that nothing happens as far as that's concerned. Any other questions or comments about that report? Seeing none, we do need a motion to receive and file that. Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Westgate. All in favor? That is carried. Council, we have about 3 minutes, but I'm gonna invite our guest delegation in now because we want to make sure that he's not waiting too long.
I'll be back in 1 minute.
All right.
There he is, Mayor Rambo.
Hi, Bill. One of our counselors has just excused himself for a minute, but he will be back in less than a minute, I'm sure. So.
Okay.
Bill is here to discuss the municipal enforcement unit and parking ticket enforcement. So we're going to turn it over to you as soon as Councillor Westgate returns. And
Okay.
Amanda, you're going to share your screen for the presentation.
Do you see that?
Yep.
Yep, I can see that. Thank you.
Great. And just for council's information and clarification, Chief is related to report 13B, CL 0920 on parking tickets and enforcement. Just point out that link for you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor and Council, member of staff for having me attend your meeting this evening. I'm here to discuss what services that the MEU can offer the Township of Warwick. If you could go to the next slide, Amanda, please. This presentation I'm going to give you will give you a very brief overview of how enforcement is done and how we have learned over years to do enforcement, and talks about the different areas of how we do enforcement, what types of enforcement we do, and it gives you a little bit of idea how the courts work, tickets work, warnings work, all that good stuff. So it's a good overview for members of council so they understand what the job is that an MLEO does, which is a municipal law enforcement officer. Can you go to the next slide, please? So enforcement means a lot of things to different people. As you can see here, there's a definition from Webster's dictionary. But enforcement doesn't stop there with enforcing laws. It also has to do a lot with education, letting the public know that there's a bylaw in place, working with the public to develop a bylaw, or working with local governments to develop bylaws. Enforcement could be as simple as me just speaking to a person and saying, listen, this is what you're doing wrong. You need to stop. If you don't stop, there could be consequences, kind of thing. Or it could be as simple as providing a person with some information about a bylaw that they don't know about. And I find over all the years I've been doing this, which is getting close to 25, I can't believe I'm getting that old. But anyways, a lot of people just don't know about the bylaws. They don't understand what the bylaws are. They don't even know that there are bylaws in some cases. And a lot of people just don't understand why rules were put in place for people. You go to the next slide. So the key areas that we consider when we're doing training is officer presence, okay, contact information, warnings, and notices and negotiations and education. So officer presence is pretty simple, explanatory. An officer shows up in uniform. He's there to talk to you about something, and then he's making contact with you. He's giving you information, or he's talking to you about a problem. There could be a warning over that problem. It could end up with a notice or something. And there also could be negotiations, such as like with property standards when we're doing cleanups of properties and things like that. Sometimes, you're not going to be able to clean a property up overnight. Sometimes it might take, I've had properties go like 6-7 months. The messes are that big. Like the one I can give as an example was 200 tractor trailers. It took 6 months for that cleanup to take place, and contractors, and it was a real logistical nightmare. So we call that negotiation part, where we're trying to figure that out. And then of course the education is part of it, and then also enforcement if need be. If we go to the next slide, please. Us just showing up at a place is considered an enforcement action unto itself. Just our presence being there. The officer in uniform can indicate different things to different people. Some may see it as a sign that there's an issue that needs to be looked at. Others may be aware there's a problem of a situation in the area, and the officer is there to bring assistance or give information to the person. Go to the next slide. Oh, one more. There we go. Okay. The initial contact with the person is always critical for an officer. How a person reacts will guide an officer on how the contact will proceed. And that's very true. We teach this in training. With our officers, we do a lot of dynamic simulation where we have role players come in and play different parts. And part of that training is how to react to a person when they react to you. I always let my officers say, let the person dictate how the conversation is going to go to a degree when you meet them and talk to them. So if they come out and they're all hard with you and they're, oh, you get off my property and blah, 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 blah. I always try to go back and give them a second chance to rethink things, because I remind them that, this is pretty serious. You could be facing some charges. You could be in trouble, blah, 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 blah. Then the person will come back, usually, I'd say 90% of the time, and they'll take that second opportunity to talk with you and get things under control. But the main important thing is to be very clear about why you're attending that location when you're speaking with whoever it is. And it's important to be professional at all times. And I teach my officers that. We spend weeks in training, learning how to do all that stuff. And I've actually been hired by their communities to teach their officers how to do this type of work. Go to the next slide. This is kind of what we call the information circle, as I call it. So the complaint would be received either by you as the municipality or me as your agency. We would investigate and do an inspection, and then it would come to contact, resolution, and compliance. So what we mean by that is once the inspection's there, if the complaint is founded, say if we got a call to go to John Doe's property and he has 30 derelict vehicles, we arrive, and out of that 30, there's 20 that are definitely derelict, but there's 10 that have plates that are current and everything. Then we would get into talking to him about what we can do to get rid of the other vehicles. And we would come into some kind of a plan. Hopefully he would comply. Most of the time they usually do. And then there'd be resolution and then it'd be dealt with. So then that case would be cleared. You go to the next slide, please. Warnings and notices. In our world, if you've noticed my crest throughout some of the presentation, we have this little thing about education, integrity, and community. Education is part of this where we would give a warning. It's not always a ticket. A lot of times it's either I'm personally talking to a person or I will write them a written warning. Sometimes why we do written warnings is to start establishing a trail when we're dealing with an enforcement case. Say open burning, which is a really good one because we have a lot of that in rural areas and we do have problems with that in a lot of the municipalities where I work. So the first time I attend that property for an open burning complaint, if it wasn't really too seriously, just say maybe he didn't call right away for a permit but called later and he might have burned a couple things that he shouldn't have burnt, I might issue him a warning if he's cooperative with me and understands what he did wrong. But that warning could come back later saying if I had to attend that property a second time and then I had to lay a charge because he had violated the bylaw, then I have that warning as evidence when I go to court to show a judge that, well, I went to John Doe's property a week before I gave him this ticket, Your Honor. We gave him a warning. He was given a copy of the bylaw. He should understand what was wrong and what he was doing wrong. That helps us with our convictions. It also helps with educating because you're going to find some people just don't know about the bylaws. So we'll issue a notice. We might give them a warning this time around, say, hey, make sure that your dog, you don't let him run at large again. He has to be on a leash. This is your written warning, or this is your verbal warning. Take their information, and that'll help us later. But it also helps us keep track of all interaction, which is very important. And I'm very kind of picky about having written warnings. I always make sure the officers are doing that and they're doing it well. So there's a little bit of a sample of different things that we use in different municipalities. Go to the next slide. We were talking about open burning. This is an educational pamphlet made for South Huron, reference their bylaw. Animal control, parking. We use warnings sometimes for parking. Instead, it looks like a real ticket, but it actually says warning where the fine is. So we can give people warnings to educate them about stuff. Go to the next slide. So you can see there's more warnings and notices. The do not ticket, that one there is used if we get a call for a person who says, oh, my vehicle's broke down. I can't get it towed. I can't get it moved until the next day in the morning. I have to leave it on the road overnight. You might see the officer that's out on night shift put one of those tags on the antenna or on the front of the windshield so that other officers, including the OPP, understand that they've already talked to us. Do not ticket this vehicle. We've already talked to the person. An officer may issue a notice to a property owner advising them of the property requiring cleanup. We would leave a warning notice or a violation notice, as we call it. And a lot of these notices are what we consider the first stage in dealing with someone when we talk to them. Go to the next slide, please. So this is kind of what a notice would look like exactly, like for open burning. And we can make all these notices specialized for bylaws. We also have a general notice that we use. It's called a general MEU violation notice. And then we write down the municipality that we're in, the actual bylaw, the section, and then we would describe what we need done to correct it. This is one that's pre-formatted for open burning in this case. Next slide. So when a notice has been issued, for an example, we've been talking about property standards because it's a big thing for most municipalities. If I went back to that property, say after the 30 days that I've given that gentleman to clean up, and I come back and I find out that about 75% of the work's done, and he says to me, he says, I only got like 2 or 3 more cars, Bill, to get rid of. Can I get just a little bit more time? That's what we consider negotiating. And I don't have a problem with that. And most of my officers wouldn't either. They would say, okay, that's fine. I'll give you another week to get rid of those couple cars. And we would work with the person. And it's key in our job that we do that. And that's what we call the negotiation process. Most municipalities like that idea. They like us to be able to work with people as much as we can. Of course, there's always going to be a time when you have to put an end to the work, but it demonstrates your willingness to assist the property owner and can build a good, solid trust and foundation with that person when you're dealing with them. So maybe if you have to deal with them in the future, next time around, they're going to know, and they're going to be a little bit more understanding, and they're going to be a little bit more cooperative. Go to the next slide. When it finally gets down to the point where we have to take enforcement action, when compliance has not been achieved, the MLEO has exhausted all ways of trying to get the person to comply. We would probably look at some sort of enforcement action. Sometimes, depending on the case thing, say if it was a dog bite, we would take immediate enforcement action. Or a parked car, that's called immediate enforcement action, where we would write a parking ticket right away. But in other areas, it might take the stance of a ticket. I've seen where we've written a ticket and then the person complies, and then we have to, when we go to court, we would renegotiate with the Crown saying, listen, the guy did finally clean up. It took him 2 weeks longer than what we thought. And the Crown would say, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, we might only want to have to give him half the fine instead of the full fine. It also helps us with previous interactions with the subject. So if they fail to comply several times, it just shows the courts that we've done everything that we can do in making lawful requests of them. And that's why we had to take that enforcement action. And that's why it has to be immediate and it has to be dealt with. Go to the next slide, please. Next slide there, Amanda. Should be issuing a ticket or citation. Okay. So if we have to write a ticket, part 1 is usually your parking stuff. Part 2 is the big ticket, as I call it. And then part 3 would be a summons for an offense to attend court. So the subject would be given a copy of whatever we've decided. So say it's a parking ticket, or, well, let's say it's a property standards ticket, and we give him a ticket for failing to comply with the cleanup. We would give that ticket to the person. We would explain what the charges are. He'd be given his 3 options, just like the police give you 3 options when they write you a speeding ticket. We do the same thing. It's the exact same ticket as they write. And then they have 15 days to deal with that ticket. If a summons is issued to the accused, a court date will be set for them. So in your case, I would contact the Lambton courts and say, when's the next part 3 day for court? And they would give me a date, and then I would write out on the summons the date, and then that's the date that we would attend court for the first part of the first hearing on the case. Then the judge could either set a date for trial, or it might be resolved by just talking to the Crown, and a deal could be made. It depends on every county. Everyone has different stuff. I don't believe early resolution is part of the process here in Lambton, but it still does happen when you go to court. I likened it to like Monty Hall, let's make a deal. It pretty much happens every day in provincial court. Once the courts are back up and running, right now it's been a little bit difficult with COVID, but some of the court systems are starting to function now. We're starting to get through things. Next slide is just a sample of a ticket. My officers are given, if you could see me here, I have what we call cheater cards. So we would make up cheater cards for your municipality. And what it basically does is describe all the offenses under a bylaw, gives us a set fines and all that stuff so that we can write the tickets. Beside that ticket, which is the same ticket a police officer writes, is a cheater card to help an officer if they don't remember, because some of my officers are part-time. I've got more full-time lately than part-time, but it helps them write out the ticket properly so it will get through the courts without any problems. The next slide. This kind of gives you an idea of how the courts work. So a minor offense, part 1, part 2, parking, might be a ticket for dog running at large, a ticket for open burning, things like that. Some municipalities are still stuck in part 3, where everything is a summons to court. We recommend that municipalities get out of that flow because it costs the municipality more money because they have to have a lawyer attend or they have to pay the crown or for a prosecutor. So we suggest tickets, which is much easier. It's quicker, it's faster, and it can be done right on the spot. Part 3 to be we have to lay in information. We have to issue a summons. There's a court date, and it could get dragged out and dragged out and dragged out. And it gets expensive again, like I said, to the municipality to retain a lawyer to deal with all those things. So one of the things that I would do as part of my service when I start with the township, if I do, I would look at your bylaws and then I would make recommendations. And also, part of my service is that I've got a lot of experience writing these bylaws. I'm sure you all know Brad Loosely at some point in time in your careers. And Brad was the CEO of Petroleum when I first started doing bylaw enforcement way back in the day. And he took me under his wing and he showed me how to do all this stuff. And I've been doing it ever since. And I write a lot of legislation for a lot of municipalities that I'm working with right now. Next slide, please. So if I give a ticket, the first outcome would be that the person pleads guilty, pays the ticket within the 15-day time frame, or makes arrangements to make payments on the ticket. They plead guilty and it's done with. This would clear the ticket. No further action would be taken by the bylaw officers, and then we would ensure that compliance is required. Go to the next slide, please. The second outcome, person signs the back of the ticket within the 15 days requesting a trial. The person will be contacted, given the next closest court date for trial. And that could happen even with a parking ticket. That could happen with an open burning or property standards. That can happen with any ticket. You have the right to be heard. But then again, like I said, there also may be an early resolution depending on the jurisdiction, and a deal might be cut. The final step would be if we have to go to trial, and that's in front of a judge or a justice, and then we would deal with it. And then a decision is rendered by the JP. Some of the fines, like for zoning, let's say, you can have a fine up to $10,000, and that would definitely be a Part 3 offense. So we would summons that person to court, and the judge would hear our side of the case. He would hear their side of the case. He would hear from our experts, which would be your planner and your building official and things like that, and myself as the officer that was investigating. And then the judge would make a determination. So he could be fined up to $10,000, but he might only get a fine for $2,500. It's just going to kind of depend on what the judge makes that decision. But we want to try to get away from that because, again, very labor intensive, very costly, and you're really rolling the dice when you start going to trial. Next slide, please. So this presentation just kind of gives you a brief overview. I'm sure that everybody has about 1 million questions they want to ask, and hopefully I can do that. So we'll just open up the floor and we'll have at it.
Thank you, Bill. Counselors, do you have any questions for Bill? Counselor Morris. Counselor Morris, you are muted.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Bill, do you use marked cars or plain cars?
We use stealth vehicles, actually. We do have some the cars that have stealth markings, but we also use UC vehicles too. I mean, it's just trying not to cause too much kerfuffle when we show up in a neighborhood. it's bad enough when a big 6'3" monster gets out of the car in uniform and then, you know, all dressed up and everything and doing all that. So we try to be as low key as possible. I found that that kind of works. Definitely uniform presence is better than plain clothes. People tend to pay a little bit more attention to you when you're in uniform. But the cars are marked. The police have register of all our vehicles. They knew who's who. So if anybody called, the OPP would say, "Oh no, that's okay. That's the bylaw guy. You know, don't worry about it," kind of thing.
Okay. The other question I had, you said you're going to put together a list of our bylaws.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind seeing that because I'm not sure if I know them all.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a thing that probably a lot of members of the public don't even know. To be honest with you, I
We're
find
going
that
to get calls on them when you give them the ticket. What do you mean this is a bylaw? I'd like to know what the actual bylaws were, I guess. When you get your book done, I'd love a copy.
okay, we can make that happen for you, sir.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Any other counselors have any questions? Counselor Westgate, you are muted as well.
Yes, we have other bylaw enforcers, like for animal control, for the county does our
Property standards.
property standards and so on. Are we going to get, if we went with Bill, would he do the whole works or just part?
It's a good
Just
question.
parking.
Thank you.
On
Amanda.
my part, I can answer that we can do it all. It's a one-stop shop. That's what we specialize in. So we could take care of your property standards matters. We could take care of your animal control matters. We don't catch dogs, so you still need a dog catcher or someplace where we can take the dogs, but we can lay all the charges to deal with animal control and all that stuff. So it's a one-stop shop for us here.
Amanda, can you give council a kind of an idea of what your intentions were with the report?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Rumbas and Councilor Westgate. That's a great question. Part of the appeal of the Municipal Enforcement Unit is that they are qualified to do any enforcement that is needed for us with our bylaws. At this time, our agreement that's proposed or outlined on this council agenda includes appointment for all services of MEU. However, we do have great relationships with our current animal control and with the County of Lambton on our property standards. So it would not be our intent at this time to transfer those things to Municipal Enforcement Unit if they were appointed, rather to keep things as they flow in other areas. But I think Municipal Enforcement Unit offers some great advantages. We started looking at them just for parking alone. As you know, we have a gap in our parking enforcement, but they're definitely capable of more should we wish to change in the future.
What could we, on a service by service basis, like if we have a particular problem with a neighborhood of animals, let's say, or dogs, that our current enforcement isn't really working, to me, having a uniformed officer is sometimes more impactful in that situation. Like, can we use it?
What we do with most municipalities for animal control, it's a big problem. Dogs, licensing, all these things that go with it. What we do, for instance, Southwest Middlesex is a good example, and so is North Middlesex. They have dog catcher. They have a facility where they can be housed. They take care of that. Most of the dog catchers you will find don't know how to write a ticket. I've actually trained Glencoe Animal Shelter before for ticket writing and note taking because they're not trained in that aspect. So they leave the charges and the enforcement part to me. They just take care of the animals, which might be an option. I don't know who your animal control person is. I don't know if he knows how to write tickets or he's laid charges in the past. I don't know any of that stuff, but just as an example that I can give, in most municipalities, the animal control itself, like the catching of dogs and dealing with dogs, like if they need to be caught or taken because of DOLA or quarantine and all that stuff is handled by an agency, and then we handle the enforcement, the investigations, the charges. So that's one option that you could do for that if you wish.
Okay.
So
Any
so
other
we could
questions?
certainly look at partnership opportunities, sorry, Mayor Rembas,
No.
and certainly with the agreement that's proposed, if ever there was an unavailable, like our service wasn't meeting our standard, or we were, there was a delay for whatever reason, we would be able to have that flexibility to expedite and work with municipal enforcement unit on any services that they've been appointed to do, which is all of them.
Okay. And Councillor Mitchell.
Just a quick question, Bill. What would officer presence look like? Would that be something that is like an on-call, or you'd have to receive calls for service, or would you have somebody kind of floating around?
It depends on what kind of service you want. Some municipalities have us patrol, and then we take care of case files while we're doing the patrols. It could be that you call me out strictly to say, Bill, we want you to do parking enforcement from 2 a.m. till 6 a.m. and we want all the cars off the road for winter plowing. It's really, we're pretty flexible at what we can do for you. It's what you as the client require. And we curtail each program to what you as the client ask for. So officer presence, you're going to get a guy in uniform. He's going to go do the work that you required him to do or asked him to do. If you want patrols, just to have the doors shown and that they know somebody's out there, we do that in some municipalities. Actually, in Petrolia, we were pretty much the police there for quite a while. And because we were there more than they were. I mean, we were there every weekend, all weekend, and holidays and all kinds of stuff. So it depends on what you as the township require. So, but we can curtail a program for what you need.
Amanda, I'm sure it says it in the report, but can you tell us what your intentions were as far as the bylaw enforcement for the parking was concerned to get us started with?
Sure.
I'll let you go.
So Heather, our deputy clerk, actually worked on our parking report and has done a huge research project to help us identify options for enforcement and enforcing tickets. And her recommendation in her report is that we move forward with a partnership with Municipal Enforcement Unit for parking enforcement. Now, the agreement that's presented does appoint MEU for all services. The intent would be that as staff, we would be able to administer the agreement as needed, but for parking, for sure, Municipal Enforcement Unit would be our primary parking enforcement moving forward should the agreement be passed.
And you're thinking around how many hours per week?
So our current enforcement services allows for 20 hours per week. We hadn't entered that level of detail with Chief Menzie yet, but I think Heather and I were thinking that we would do some proactive scheduled enforcement. As you know, we do have some hotspots for parking enforcement in the area, and also seasonally, seasonal changes as winter comes and road parking, and also then kind of on call as needed. But we would lean towards a little bit of that proactive enforcement for a set number of hours.
Okay.
And if I,
oh, sorry, Bill, go ahead.
yeah, if I could say something on that, I have already been working with your staff a little bit about that, trying to figure out how to process the tickets. And I think we've got that system figured out now since Sarnia has changed their system quite a bit. So I think we've got a plan worked out for that. I was able to help staff out with that. The other thing too that should be mentioned too is that because we've been doing a lot of it since the outbreak of COVID, is that we can also help you deal with that too for the Reopening Act of Ontario. We've been dealing with those issues quite a bit for a lot of different municipalities. So if you guys are having any issues that way, we can also be relied on to take care of that kind of stuff and handle that kind of stuff, because sometimes it'll be hard to get an OPP officer out there to do it. So we're capable of handling all that stuff also if you have any issues with that stuff.
Okay.
If I may just support, sorry, Mayor. Oh, sorry,
Yes.
Councilor had a question. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Wayne, I didn't see your hand up. Councillor Morris.
Yeah, I just, my opinion, I really don't want to start into the COVID enforcement business. I think that's a provincial issue and an LPP issue.
Okay,
I was-
any other?
I was
Oh.
just making the point, Councilman, that we're available to do that work, and we've been doing it already in several municipalities. So if something should arise where you need an expert in that area, I'm kind of like the Buddha right now. I'm getting calls from the police on how to do it. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that we could help you out with that. If something should arise, we're capable of dealing with that.
Well, we're very fortunate here in Warwick Township. We have a great community that's looking out for each other. We haven't so far had to enforce anything. So we're very fortunate that way. Amanda, you were going to say something earlier.
My final comment was just to support what Bill was saying. So as council may know, in your review of the report CL 1120, our review of our parking services back in April started actually because the city of Sarnia changed its ticket processing system and used to process our tickets for us through the courts, but no longer was able to provide that services. So we actually reached out to MEU to help us navigate what options were there. And Bill has been very helpful and supportive, educating us on what the options were, and definitely has helped us come up with what Heather's recommended as our proposed solution for council's consideration.
On that note, council, we'll go on to the report CL 0920, which is the processing unpaid parking tickets and enforcement. So if council has any questions, then Amanda or Bill or Heather can answer those questions, I'm sure. There is a recommendation on that report. How does council want to deal with that recommendation? Councillor Westgate, are you moving that? You are muted, please.
Yes, I'll move to accept it.
Okay, thank you. And do we have a seconder to that? Councillor Mitchell? Questions, comments about that report, council? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. And in line with that as well, Bill, if you want to just wait, should I skip down, Amanda?
To what, Mayor Brumbaugh?
Is there another one?
I think
dealing
we
with-
just, no, I think you just dealt with the report CL
Okay.
11 or CL 0920.
20, okay. So
That was the end, I think, of the last resolution. So I think we're done this matter unless there's any additional questions. And Bill, I look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much for having me this evening.
thanks for coming out and giving us your report, and it'll be great to see your guys in the streets of Warwick.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
You too, thank you.
All right, council, we are going to go on to the amendments to procedural bylaw number 10 of 2019. How does council want to deal with that recommendation? Councillor Morris, are you moving that?
No, I think that you got two choices, don't you? Proxy voting and non-proxy voting. I am against proxy voting.
Are we on that one? Or
Question for clarification,
one.
yeah.
I think the proxy voting is D.
Oh, I am sorry. Which
No,
one are
no
we on?
problem. This is the one concerning the electronic meetings to be called outside of a declared state of emergency. So if the weather was poor and we weren't able to get into the hall or wherever it was that we were going to be meeting, then this would allow us to meet as a council outside of the declared emergency.
So you're talking about like a Zoom meeting then, Jack? Or-
Yes, yeah,
Okay, I have no problem with that.
okay. Councillor Westgate.
Can we have part of us there and one not there and come in on the phone or on the computer?
I believe you can come in on the phone, but I don't think that that person has the right to vote. Is that correct, Amanda?
That's in line with our current procedural bylaw. That's correct, Mayor Rumbaugh. Council does have the option, though, of directing me, to your point, Councillor Westgate. Should council wish to provide direction to me to review our levels of electronic participation in meetings, so think that in person and electronic together, you can do so because, as I understand, there is legislation now that allows full participation from a member, I'll say telecommuting, that's what we used to call it, calling into an in-person meeting. But right now, our procedural bylaw only allows calling in to listen and add comments, but not as a voting member and not as a member of quorum. So this particular amendment deals solely with having this format of meeting in a non-emergency declaration world, so that if needed, we could meet this way. But it doesn't address that voting rights of electronic participation or telecommuting to a council meeting. But I can investigate that if directed. If that helps.
Councillor Westgate.
I'd like to see direction given to Amanda to do that, because sometimes we need it just to get a quorum. And right now, I think some of us would be willing to go to a live council meeting again if we have one person come in electronically. That would be great.
That's a good point, Councillor Westgate. Councillor Mitchell.
I think Councillor Westgate hit the nail right on the head there. I think I just want to second that motion. Absolutely. That's a great
So
idea.
would we like to pass this and then give staff direction to look into adding into the bylaw for the next council meeting the ability to join a
Do you wanna
meeting?
pass this or just have it included and pass it in one bylaw?
Well, I guess it doesn't really matter since we're meeting it on Zoom until we're in an emergency.
Till the
right
end of the
now.
year.
Amanda, did you want to comment about that?
If possible, Councillor Westgate, I'd prefer if your intent is to pass the recommendation, I would prefer to have that. That way I know I can use that wording for the new bylaw, and then I'll take a separate direction to bring back a report with information on, for clarity, I'll call it telecommuting to meetings.
Okay, then I'll
If that's
move that we pass this bylaw.
All right, and seconder from Councillor Mitchell, and any other questions or comments about that? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. And we will go on to the proxy vote, one that Wayne was discussing earlier. So council, you do have two options there. We can either go with the proxy voting, in which case that would be, so if Jerry couldn't make it to a meeting, he could say to Wayne, this is how I want to vote on each of the things, and Wayne could place his vote, I believe. And Wayne, did you want to talk, or Councillor Mitchell, did you want to talk about it?
I just don't want to go to the proxy. I don't agree with proxy systems. If you want to vote, you be there, or if we do end up doing it electronically, that's fine. But as far as me giving somebody else my right to vote, I'm against.
Okay. Councillor Mitchell, you're nodding in agreement. Councillor Westgate, did you want to speak to that?
I agree with Wayne. I think if I was gonna have Wayne's vote, he wouldn't be at the meeting. He wouldn't hear everything that was said, pro and con. And I think you should be at the meeting and know all the details before you vote. And a proxy vote does not do that.
Yes, that's exactly what county decided as well, for those reasons. You're not there, you don't hear all of the staff answers to the questions. So Councillor Mitchell, you are moving then, or Councillor Morris, you're moving that.
We do not use proxy.
Thank you. And Councillor Mitchell, you want to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor of that. That is carried.
For
Thank you.
clarity, just to confirm, that motion will read that the report be received and filed. Councillor Morris, is that
That's fine. I
appropriate?
understand.
Thank you.
Yep. Perfect. All right, council, we're going to go down to committee and other minutes. So the first one is the minutes of the Warwick Township Cemetery Board meeting of August 26th. And Councillor Morris is laughing. Did you want to highlight anything from that meeting, Councillor Morris?
It was a very interesting meeting. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the decoration day, but Amanda did a great job in pulling people together that maybe didn't have any Zoom experience. We had a good turnout, and I'd like to thank Amanda for it.
Good.
And
And
Heather. And Heather, our deputy clerk.
So I move to accept the minutes.
all right. Do we have a seconder to that? Councillor Mitchell. And any questions or comments from those who were not at the meeting? Councillor Westgate.
Did everyone receive the email from Bob Alcock for wanting space at the, was that talked about at the meeting at all?
No, that came in after, Jerry.
Okay,
I think it's something we need to discuss later on.
I had said to Amanda that I think that should be deferred to the cemetery board committee.
well, that's what I thought too, but
Yeah, and then later approved by council, the same as this. Amanda, did you want to speak to that?
I just wanted to comment, Councillor Westgate, thanks for bringing that up. Actually, Mr. Alcock is awaiting a response from the municipality still. So with this reminder, I will get in touch with him just to confirm receipt and to advise that it will go to our next cemetery board meeting.
Can, through the chair of the cemetery board meeting, I'm wondering if we should invite them as a delegate to speak to that, to the cemetery board. If they
I
wish.
don't, do we have a meeting scheduled or even on the books for the cemetery board, Amanda? So,
Not at this time.
I would really like to hear council's opinion on it later on this maybe, before we have the cemetery board. So I would assume then council would like a special cemetery board meeting called.
I don't know how anxious the Legion is to get this project underway.
I think they want it done.
I don't think there's a sense of timeline in the email, but perhaps we, if I may, we could follow up with a staff follow-up with Mr. Alcock, ask him about the Legion's timelines and plans, and get a sense of what they're looking at. And then through the chair of the board, we can work through maybe the timing for the next steps and make sure to keep council updated.
That's Councillor Westgate.
I just like to point out that I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's good to have something there just outside the gate. And I wouldn't imagine they'd want to do anything until next spring, but if he does, maybe we could call a special meeting and get on with it.
They might want to order things, and I don't know how long the bench will take to order and so that they can have it ready for next spring.
But did I misunderstand the email, or is there not a plaque with all the names on it too? That's a lot of work. That's why I guess as soon as we get everybody's opinion and get back to the Legion, I think we get the board meeting called and give them an okay or no way, I guess.
Just reading from council, like, I think it's a great idea as well. Any time we highlight our veterans is always good, so. But yeah, we do need to go through the proper procedures, so.
Okay.
And I think Mr. Alcock would know better than any of us how soon he needs to have approvals. So if Amanda reaches out to him and then we go from there. Are we good with that? Yeah. All right, so we need to approve receiving and filing. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Yes. Councillor Morris moved it and Councillor Westgate seconded, and all in favor of receiving and filing. That is carried. Thank you. And the CIP committee was busy on September 1st. We do need a mover and a seconder to receive and file those minutes. And if those minutes are approved, then all of those recommendations by the CIP will go through. So Councillor Mitchell, were you moving to receive and file that report?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you. And a seconder for that. Councillor Westgate, any questions or comments about those? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. It'll be exciting to see some of those improvements happen to our downtown. All right, we will go to the minutes of the special council meeting of September 14th, which was held at the community center. Councillor Morris, are you moving to receive?
I'm moving to receive and file or accept those minutes.
Okay, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Mitchell. Any questions or comments, errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. And then we have the Public Works meeting of September 16th. Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Morris. Any questions or comments, errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. And we'll go to 15A, which is in new business. Sorry, Amanda?
Mayor Roberts, I think we missed item C, September 2nd special council meeting, minute approval.
You are right. Thank
We
you.
did D and E, but missed C.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No
We
problem.
need a mover and a seconder for those minutes. Moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Mitchell, all in favor. That
Thank
is carried. Thank you, Amanda. Sorry about that. That's why we have amazing staff. Keep me on my toes. All right, so we have the council remuneration schedule for August 1st to December 31st, 2020, I believe. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that?
We have the one number wrong.
Yeah, I think so. Under total yearly for honorarium.
Yes. For the counselors, should be 5,000.
Oh, yeah.
So we will get that corrected.
We will correct that. Thank you very much for pointing that out. And actually, no motion is needed. This happens automatically. So
Okay.
it's just for your information. You're welcome to receive and file if you wish, but we will make sure to correct that for you.
Okay, thank you. So we won't worry about receiving and filing then? We will move on to the petition for drainage improvements for the Moffett Drain Branch 7 extension. How does council want to deal with that? Councillor Morris and Councillor Mitchell.
No, I have some questions on this.
Okay.
Or Jackie, sorry. I guess
No problem.
for Andrew. Andrew, this is directly the water from the lagoon. How does the engineer figure out what the lagoon's share would be on something like this?
Well, they will use past practice and rules of the Drainage Act, and he'll figure it out. I guess that's the short answer.
Because I think probably 90% of that water going through will be from the lagoon.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep. He will. Yeah, he'll take that into consideration
okay.
with assessment.
Councillor Westgate.
On assessment for something like this, when it really doesn't improve the flow, they're just moving the ditch. All it is helping the farmers on their land. We would get less assessment for that, right?
Yeah, they would have a look at it, and yeah, generally speaking, there wouldn't be an assessment for everyone else, but it's part of their investigation. If it would have otherwise required a clean out or whatever the case may be.
Yes,
But generally speaking, yeah, the farmer will pay most of it.
because
That,
they're the only ones that are really
That-
gaining
that-
from it.
that's correct.
Okay. Any other questions about that? All right, we have a mover and a seconder, so all in favor? That is carried, thank you. And there is a motion in support of the Township of Warwick grant application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipals Asset Management Program for Strategic AMP Development and Implementation. That's a mouthful. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Westgate. Any questions on that report? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right, council, we are going to move, we need a motion to move into a closed meeting session for the listed reasons. Moved by Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Mitchell. All in favor? That is carried. And for those who are watching on YouTube, we will be returning into open session just to rise and report from anything from in camera and to adjourn the meeting, but we will not be going back onto YouTube. So we wish you all a good night and take care and be safe.